Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Ras Ben. But before I bring him on, I have just a few announcements. It's highly possible that very soon we may not have these platforms like YouTube or Facebook to share information, and it's time to find a different one. And I have it. It is censorship-free and completely free to join. It's one of the best ways to guarantee if they pull the plug here or Facebook, you can still access all our shows and information and share it with all your friends and everyone on the site. The new premium site is almost ready to be relaunched with all new content and content creators, but you can still sign up for a membership right now and access all the premium content that is there on our social media site in the movie section. Again, the social media site is completely free, but if you get a membership, you get access to all my interviews, presentations, and original content, much of which is considered too controversial for YouTube. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.news or click the link in the description to sign up. If you have any technical issues with the site or questions, just let us know. We have a Telegram tech support chat link in the description as well. If you'd like to make a donation, we'd greatly appreciate it. Anyone that's donated so far, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Links are in the description as well. I want to thank our sponsors, C60 Purple Power, which is now a necessity in my house. It has completely turned around my health, had amazing benefits like more energy, better sleep. Find out more, visit c60purplepower.com/knowledge10 or just click that link in the description. You get 10% off your order plus free shipping. And right now is a great time to stock up with an emergency food supply. Visit the experts in emergency preparedness, My Patriot Supply. Right now you get $70 off a 2-week supply and $100 off a 4-week supply. That's preparewithfkn.com or click that link in the description. And finally, Karen Holton. She not only offers health and wellness coaching, but the best quality orgonite zendomes and crystals out there, as well as alien implant remedy. To find out more, go to KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com or just click the link in the description. Tonight, I want to welcome Ras Ben. He is a scribe, astrologer, presenter, and self-published author of 4 books: Rocks of Ages, Great Mystery Philadelphia, An Urban Act of Magic, Free Your Mound and Your Mind Will Follow, and 5G Wellness 101. Ras Ben, welcome. How are you tonight?
Thankful.
And thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it, and much of my audience is very aware of the manipulation, corruption, and psychological warfare that has been waged on us for years. But many don't understand the occult or esoteric or even spiritual aspects behind the global situation that we're in. But not only that, but the founding of our country in general. And I believe that your work profoundly points out and explores these aspects. And tonight, I'd like to start out, since it's your first time, with what actually got you started down your path.
Well, I'm still trying to answer that myself, but I'm not from Philadelphia. I was born in Washington, D.C., but I transplanted here close to 30 years ago, about 1992. And Philadelphia has more public art than all other cities in the world except Paris, France. There's like 5,000 pieces of registered art here. And even though I'm from Washington, D.C., which has its own mystic look and feel, with the Washington Monument, all the Egyptian-themed architecture in downtown D.C., still, when I came here to Philly, man, the art really stood out. Like, yo, there is something really deep happening here. And I noticed most people who were from Philly, they kind of took the art for granted. I think it was just a part of their everyday backdrop, so they just didn't really study it, But yeah, I just knew, like, yo, man, there's something very mystic here. Started getting into the decoding of it, and that work really accelerated around between 2011, 2013. Really, we had an event here, 11/11, in 2011, because there was a lot of uh, people all around the world doing oneness ceremonies on that 11/11 day. 2011 at 11/11. So there were a lot of people here in Philly that were like, yeah, we need to do something here. They were feeling that urge. But everyone kind of wondered why. We know there's a spiritual energy here. We know there's a spiritual dynamic in Philadelphia, but what is it? And that's kind of what really accelerated this quest, which I could really just call The Great Mystery Philadelphia, And that's what the book became.
What were some of the first things when you actually got to Philadelphia, such as the landmarks and some of the artwork that you talked about and statues? What were some of the first things that you noticed that that kind of stood out to you that made you start decoding things?
Well, I, I have to say, I would think it's one of the deepest statues in the country. It's the George in front of the Philadelphia Museum of Art at
You were
Lincoln's
actually
Oval.
breaking up right when you said
And
what statue it was. What statue was that?
of course, the George Washington equestrian statue, and right in front of the Philadelphia Museum of Art at Lincoln's Oval, because it's basically depicting an assassination of a Lenape queen with colonists with cloaked daggers. And yeah, I mean, it was just such a striking statue. Like, why are y'all killing this woman? And that was one of the most significant statues, I would say, that sent me down the rabbit hole. But more than any other physical statue, Philadelphia has a energy with it. It's kind of like a knot in time where the past, present, future tightly woven, such that like that veil that separates the present from the past and the future. It's very thin here. And I think that's what Edgar Allan Poe tapped when he was doing his writing here. I think it's kind of what that movie, The Sixth Sense, was conveying, the I see dead people phenomena, which is a real thing here in Philly. I don't think that Sixth Sense movie would have worked in any other setting but here. And so that kind of opens the door to a lot of ancestral connection and a lot of ancestry works where you have ones that they kind of want their story told. I say that there is a saying that dead men tell no tales, but I'd say here in Philadelphia, you might hear a tale only a dead man can tell. That thing is real. And so that is a big part of my works. And I do state that communion with ancestors is one of my sources. And I know how I would receive that, with a little disbelief. So I do ground what I'm communed in research. And I encourage my readers to follow up. Don't believe, but let the great mystery reveal itself to you. Be a part of this great mystery. Because it has impacted the whole planet. Well, the whole country, but yeah, on levels, the whole planet. Most modern technology that we use was birthed right here in Philadelphia. Particularly electricity and the computer.
And would you say that the founding fathers knew about that this place's energy and potential before they even came over and started to settle there?
Absolutely. definitely. I mean, that is a part of Rosicrucian tradition, that they came looking for this earth mound that is what is known today as Fairmount, which is a Lenape earth mound that the Philadelphia Museum of Art is built atop of. And Rosicrucian tradition states that, hey, this earth mound is so powerful, whatever happens there happens with the full participation of the earth. So I'm pretty confident that they came here to ultimately resurrect Rome in the West, but they chose here to do it with the full participation of the earth, you know? And that kind of manifests as what you would call providence, what they would call in history providence, this grace that seemed to befall the United States. I say up until very recently, you know? But all of that providence that, you know, this country could do whatever the nature, do whatever the indigenous people worldwide have a grace and a protection with it. A lot of that came out of the magic that was worked here in Philadelphia, you know.
Most people don't realize that the whole country was kind of founded on this ritual magic, this ancient knowledge. Would you agree?
Historically, well, it is the phenomena of being hidden in plain sight, because the reality is there are no secrets. It's only mysteries. Everything that has been done and what they plan to do, they encode in art and present it for everyone to see. Because part of the magic, for it to work, they need our implied consent. So if they tell us something, even if it's in the language of the muses, and we don't consciously, you know, deny consent, resist, then they have our implied consent. So that is one of the great Mystery Philadelphia's dynamics with that public art. Like I said, there's like 5,000 pieces of registered art here in the city. And you might look at one piece in isolation and not get much from it, you know? But when you look at that piece of art, where it's placed in relationship to other pieces of art near it, it tells an amazing story that is the past, present, and future of their intentions, you know? And again, because it's in art, public art, a lot of us, we don't even choose to pay attention. You know, we want, like I told you, a lot of Philadelphians were when I got here. They just kind of take it for granted. And even if we do choose to pay attention, like, yo, that thing looks weird. That's a bizarre piece of art. Do we choose to verse ourselves in the language of the muses so that we can decode what we're seeing? A lot of us don't choose that. So, yeah, we're ignorant of what's in front of us, you know? But I will say, statues and monuments seem to be getting a lot of attention today, beyond ones trying to tear them down, which I don't necessarily affirm. I say decode, don't destroy. I think if we decode this public art properly, more than likely the people who created it will take it down themselves, because the spell will be broken, you know, and then they don't want their intentions publicly decoded and therefore everyone to see, you know. So, but I do see more people taking an interest in decoding the public art. you know?
Oh, there's a lot of people taking an interest in a lot more things that I hadn't thought I would see before. It's very encouraging. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the Philadelphia experiment as it relates to Benjamin Franklin. It's very
Mhm.
fascinating.
Well, to be honest, we'd even have to take it back to William Penn, okay? Because Philadelphia was birthed as a holy experiment, right? This was William Penn's holy experiment that if he could create a colony that the colonists and the indigenous of the area could live together in oneness, then his colony will be saved on Judgment Day. Okay? And that's the real reason why Philadelphia has its name. That is not so much involved with a city of brotherly love, biblical prophecy, being one of the 7 churches to receive a beneficent prophecy on Judgment Day. So, just to go to the, short version, Philadelphia was birthed to be a manipulation of a prophetic timeline, a historic and prophetic timeline. It was birthed to mimic fulfillment of a prophecy, but it had a nefarious intention embedded in it. Okay? We could kind of look at the modern, some would say the modern state of is it real in the Middle East is a similar phenomenon. It was birthed to mimic fulfillment of a prophecy, but has a nefarious intention built into it, you know? But because of that, it's not coincidental that the technology for actively manipulating space-time was birthed here in Philadelphia. And that is what we would call the Philadelphia experiment. And the Philadelphia experiment didn't start with the U.S. Eldridge in 1943 with, Tesla and Einstein theory and, no, it actually started with Ben Franklin and his uh, experiments with electricity that was known throughout Europe, like the reporting of Ben Franklin's experiment with electricity in France and England. It was known as Franklin's Philadelphia experiment. Okay? So the Franklin Institute of Science really never stopped Philadelphia experiment, discovering how to manipulate electromagnetism, to do some work. And so Franklin's Philadelphia experiment really did evolve into what is kind of known in pop culture as the Philadelphia experiment, where they took Tesla's confiscated technology, experimented with Einstein's theories of relativity, which, if we could kind of just explain what they were attempting to do, Einstein theory says if you get a magnetic field strong enough in gauze, it'll jump in scale to a gravitational wave. It'll cease being a magnetic field and kind of jump in scale to a gravity wave. And gravity waves influence space-time, So that was what they were doing. They used Tesla coils to create a strong enough magnetic field that it jumped in scale to a gravity wave, causing the Eldridge to drop out of that continuum, And so, again, that all really ties into this Philadelphia reality that's a knot in time. the past, present, and future are like this, you know. And a big part of it is the Philadelphia experiment.
It's very interesting when you look back at Benjamin Franklin and his experiments with the kite and electricity, as to, it seems there's trying to integrate some kind of spiritual technology with actual physical technology. Would you say that's pretty accurate on what they were attempting to accomplish?
Well, they recognized it all as one, you know. Franklin even described electricity as a fluid. He didn't, you know, look at it, I think, like how we visualize electricity in these times, you know. He looked at it as a fluid energy that, you know, could be channeled through certain things, wire being one of it, you know. And I would say they had a more alchemical, where we see it more physics and, you know, chemical. When, you know, when we say alchemical, you're right, it is encompassing the spiritual dimensions of life, you know.
Now, you mentioned that they were trying to manipulate historical and prophetic timelines. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that. And do you think that that is still an ongoing practice of some of these elites? Is they're still manipulating our timelines?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in the earlies, you know, it involved things like manipulating prophecy and manipulating scripture, making things anathema as if they never existed, you know? But again, here in Philly, it evolved into using technology to manipulate the timelines. That's what people know today as the Mandela Effect. But I want to point out, I like to point out, that's a misnomer. Because usually when you use blank effect, like butterfly effect or Mandela effect, that blank is the cause, you know? Like a butterfly flapping its wings in your bedroom causing a hurricane in the Caribbean, right? Mandela did not cause these apparent changes in our space-time continuum, you know? It was the Philadelphia experiment that did it. So what we know as the Mandela Effect would be correctly named the Philadelphia experiment effect. If you want to name it with the causality that's causing these glitches in our matrix, you know, like obvious things, like even if it's what is real, it doesn't make sense, you know. I think the most obvious example for me is the James Bond movie with the villain Jaws missing his braces, you know. That scene doesn't even make sense if he doesn't have those metal teeth. Or no, it's the young girl that's missing her braces that they had
Hey,
the attraction to. But you notice the scene I'm speaking to. So all of that's real. All of that's rooted out of the Philadelphia experiment, you know? And I
it,
think the crazier twist to it is when you factor in Donald Trump's uncle was the man who gained control of Tesla technology. Yeah, Biff Tannen takes on whole new meaning, whole new
right.
reality for
Yeah,
us
it's
right
very
now.
interesting when you think about it like that. If these elites have this technology and they have the ability to manipulate timelines and they figured this out, of course it would have consequences on, you know, time, space, and the effects that of our reality. It's very interesting to think about.
Yeah, we're witnessing it, and it's almost hard to believe. If you watch the Philadelphia Experiment 2, you know, there was a movie made on the Philadelphia Experiment. Watch the Philadelphia Experiment 2, and it's a movie based on this phenomenon we would call the Mandela Effect. But in the Philadelphia Experiment 2, there's only one person that remembers the real timeline. And it was the person who was involved in the first Philadelphia experiment. So because he had already been in a manipulated timeline, when they used the technology in Philadelphia Experiment 2, it worked on everybody except him. But he experienced the same thing that we're experiencing now as this so-called Mandela Effect, you know? So I'm still studying it, you know? And I will say too, beyond just the I would say incongruent memories, if people are experiencing what we would call phantom inflammation, just like parts of your body being inflamed and it's hard to explain why, it might be residuals of their manipulation of space-time too. And us kind of falling in between quantum states, you know, that are inflamed, causing molecular disruption to the degree that we're experiencing inflammation from it, you know.
It's very interesting. I want to get into. You wrote the book "Free Your Mound and Your Mind Will Follow." It's very interesting how that ties into what we were talking about earlier, and this kind of ritual magic that's kind of controlling everything. I'd like you to talk about the mounds. What are their significance and the origins of these ancient mounds?
Well, there's no one singular historical origin to the mounds. There are mounds that are pre-Diluvian, okay? And it's a global phenomenon. And it's very hard to just kind of, in, you know, a short sentence in a quick interview, give that history. I would say you'd have to get Free Your Mound for that backdrop, you know? But we will say, like, what is their significance? Indigenous people tended to build mounds on the magnetic ley lines of the earth. So if you, let's say you're looking for the magnetic grid of the planet, if you can identify the ancient mounds and connect them, more than likely you will have identified the magnetic ley lines of the earth. And most founding fathers, in their speculative masonry, they did learn surveying, and that was the purpose, you know? And I think the founding father who exemplifies their quest for mounds in their life, like this, if you want to study one founding father, Thomas Jefferson. That man was obsessed with mounds. He named Meridian Hill Mound in D.C., more or less laid the main 16th Street meridian of Washington, D.C. His plantation is named Monticello, which means little mound. And he conducted a stratigraphic, which means kind of like layer by layer excavation of mounds on his property, you know, to really study and be able to detail what's inside of them, you know. And so the net result of that is that most of our cities, most of our monuments, they're gridded out on a more ancient mound or, more ancient mound structures that are connected in a global mound matrix. And the thing is like if you can build your edifice or your tower of power on top of these mounds and align it with the magnetic north, whatever intention you put in that monument or that edifice, or if you're on top of that building and your thoughts are going out of the spire on that building, on that mound, yeah, you're going to have a lot stronger influence on the global mound matrix, the collective mind of humanity, than if you were just doing those same things some random place, And that's the basic magic of most urban centers in the United States. You dig down a little bit, you're going to find an indigenous mound complex, probably with a complex history too,
Right.
And that's
Now,
definitely what Philadelphia is.
yeah, and you said he excavated, Thomas Jefferson excavated a mound. What did he find inside?
Bones of ancestors, copper implements, copper adornment, copper tools, offerings. And it wasn't just one generation. It was maybe two. He calculated maybe 260 years worth of generations. They just built atop of each successive generation, built on top of the other. And so that's how mounds are grown,
It seems to me that our founding fathers basically hijacked our country's energy grids as soon as they could get their hands on them, just to kind of establish their power. And these mounds were good, I guess, markers of these energies, right?
Exactly. Again, if you don't have instrumentation to actually measure Earth's magnetic flux and be able to grid out Earth's magnetic field that way, all you got to do is find the indigenous mounds and connect the dots. And you'll more than likely have the Earth grid ley line layout of that region, And so that was the science that, you're right, the founding fathers, first 6 founding fathers, all of the residences had mound in the name in some way. George Washington, I hope I can remember it. I'm going off, memory. George Washington, Mount Vernon. John Adams, Richmond Hill in New York. Thomas Jefferson, I mentioned Monticello. James Monroe was Montpelier. Then you have, James Monroe was Monroe Hill in UVA. And James Madison is Montpelier. And then John Adams, no. Number 6 is escaping me, excuse
Oh,
me.
you did good enough. That was good enough for me.
Thank you.
That's way more than I know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, we mentioned earlier how these elites are still kind of using this spiritual technology to have power and control. Whenever we look at our world today, when you wake up if you were in a coma for a year and you woke up today, it's a completely different world than last year. It's amazing how much has changed in 1 year. I'd like to get your thoughts on what's happening now in 2020. It seems like as soon as 2020 hit, it was time to unfold agendas. It's time to get things rolling for certain groups of people. It was like a marking point, especially astrologically. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we are having several, for lack of a better word, great conjunctions occurring this year with Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, all conjuncting one another in Capricorn. And the United States was born with Pluto in Capricorn. Well, I should be more specific. Pluto was in Capricorn in 1776. Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct in Capricorn when the Treaty of Paris was signed, which is when the United States actually was birthed as a nation, got national status on the world stage, you know? And so now all three of those planets are again in Capricorn. So this is very fateful times for the nation, but also globally in the Ethiopian calendar, which is more aligned with the Julian calendar of the West, which is probably a less manipulated calendar than the Gregorian calendar. It's 2012, you know? So maybe the Olmec Mayan calendar that was supposed to end in 2012, maybe it wasn't the Gregorian 2012, more so the Ethiopian Julian. And, you know, at least that's what I think. But, you know, I've learned, man, it's difficult to name a day of the end. You know what I mean? And so many people, myself included, you know, you'll say, oh, this is the day. Right. Yeah, that even happened recently. Everybody was thinking August 27th, something super profound was going to happen. And maybe some things did, but it didn't manifest on a global scale. You know what I mean? And so it's hard. That's a hard call. You know, and I'm saying that in the context is December 21st of 2020. Is that going to be like the end, you know? But I will also say it does seem like the phenomena of the two suns is becoming a lot more relevant. I see a lot more footage. It seems like since they've stopped chemtrailing as much, there's more footage of sunsets where you see two luminaries in the sky. And on July 2nd, in sunset of Egypt, it seemed like there was a large celestial object eclipsing with the sun, but it wasn't the moon. And it was too small to be the moon, but it was too large to be any planet that we, you know, account for. So that clip I do have it on a Convergence 2020 short video I have on my Ras Bens 188 YouTube, you know.
Do
And
you
I
have any
do hope
thoughts
to
on
make
what it may be?
what they call Nibiru, you know, our sun. Most suns are binary systems. I think our sun is part of a binary system, but our twin sun has a very elliptical orbit. And so it only comes into our region of the solar system, you know, a couple thousand years. I don't know the exact
Right.
duration, but
Yes, I've had
think
quite a few people on that research Planet X and Nibiru, and it is interesting the amount of planetary changes and Earth changes that have sprung up in the past few years that they claim this may account for some of those changes.
I think one of the more recent phenomena we're seeing is the anomaly with Earth's magnetic core. How there's a magnetic dead zone kind of
Yeah,
breaking up
South
in the
Atlantic
South
anomaly.
Atlantic.
Yes.
Yeah, so like usually what causes magnetic change in orientation? Another strong magnetic field coming in proximity, you know? So I think that is one other thing affirming it. But again, I'm seeing a lot more footage of it that seems credible than what I've seen in the past.
That's very
Particularly that
interesting.
footage July 2nd. That's amazing. If you haven't seen it, I recommend looking for it and checking it out.
Yeah, definitely. I am gonna have to check it out. I used to do a lot of research into the Planet X and Nibiru phenomenon. In fact, that's what I really started out looking at. And you're right. The South Atlantic anomaly it's growing larger by the day. Not only that, our magnetic field is moving further north. Every day, and there's a possibility that we could see a magnetic reversal within our lifetime. So there is a lot of evidence that points to a possibility of another celestial body out there, which is very interesting. That's a whole nother show we could get into. I want to get your thoughts on you talked about before that this may not have been the first. I guess I should preface it with there are some that believe that this pandemic that we're seeing is not completely natural and could possibly have been planned for a long time, and that this may not have been the very first time that we may have seen something like this with yellow fever. And you've done a little research into that. Could you talk about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is not America, the United States' first pandemic that we're living. The first pandemic was Philadelphia's yellow fever epidemic of 1793, where you had a guy named Stephen Girard, who was a misanthrope, someone who hated humanity, at least by his behavior, attempting to be, cast himself like a philanthrope, someone who loves humanity by stepping up and being such a great giver and bringing all these solutions to a crisis he created. And he created it by bringing about 3,000 refugees from Haiti to Philadelphia, with many of them carrying yellow fever, which was a mosquito-borne disease, And he actually did it right. He made himself appear like a philanthrope, but he was actually attempting to help the political agenda of the man Citizen Genet or Citizen Gannett, depending on how you want to pronounce his name. So I encourage all your viewers to research the Citizen Genet affair, where he was a French ambassador who attempted to instigate the United States in the war with Great Britain. And George Washington, ironically, was taking like an America first position, wanting to stay neutral. And you had another character in the mix named Benjamin Rush, who had a super bizarre therapeutic regime, therapeutic protocol that basically involved bloodletting and mercury enemas, mercury jalapeno enemas. And, he said that was the cure for yellow fever and said everyone needed it, So I'm sure we could, see the overtones.
Yeah,
I
sounds like
recommend
Fauci.
Yeah, exactly. I recommend everyone check out I put it on YouTube, it's called America's First, Great Mystery Philadelphia Reveals America's First Pandemic. Because there is a lot of evidence, historically based. Most relevant, I think, are the letters of John Adams, of his account of these, because there were even mass riots in the middle of this yellow fever pandemic. There were riots in Philadelphia, again, pushing this Citizen Genet's efforts, So a lot of the things that we're seeing today, this country's already been through it, But John Adams' account, firsthand account of it, really breaks it all down, And him describing the artificial terrors of those times,
It's very interesting. And, nowadays when you have a mass media and now social media, it must be 100 times easier to pull something like this off. You're thinking back in those times of yellow fever, disinformation spreads a lot slower. So now they have a lot more tools to get this done.
Yes. When you look at that yellow fever pandemic, we even see the roots of media manipulation going back to a man named John Wister, and how John Wister really is kind of he, he is a very significant person in establishing what we would call this medical industrial complex we see today, and the approaches that they choose to use, like mercury, vaccines, you know, uh, Worcester had a big hand in that, and was established right across the street from the Worcester Big House right here in Philly, you know. So, Philadelphia is the foundry of this nation. A foundry is a place where whole industries, whole things are birthed, and most things we see on a macrocosmic scale with the nation, you'll first find it like developing, evolving, being crafted on a microcosmic scale here in Philly first,
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the way things are progressing now. One of the good things that I see coming out of this is the amount of new enlightenment I'm seeing from people, people that are searching for more truth, people opening their eyes to things, opening their minds, coming around and researching things. There's this mass awakening going on around the planet, and I think it's because this event, this whole thing in 2020, kind of set it off. Although even before 2020, I started to see people questioning things actually since probably 2012, but it kind of really skyrocketed after this year. Is that something you see as well?
Yeah, I affirm that. I definitely affirm that. And I would say to all your listeners, don't take your thoughts for granted. We need to achieve, and when I say we, humanity, we need to achieve like a collective critical mass of consciousness. Enough of us thinking consciously, uh, you know, have our intentions kind of on aligned with a redemptive timeline. We get that critical mass, we'll start seeing what I would call collective magic, even quicker transformations, quicker turnarounds, the blind order followers who, a lot of the things that are going on couldn't happen if you didn't have these blind order followers just following orders blindly. We get that critical mass of consciousness, they're going to wake up, and yeah, don't take your thoughts for granted.
Yeah,
And
very well said.
we have a each one teach one philosophy. It doesn't have to be one big man at the podium. It can be many small platforms like the ones we have, but touching not only the minds but also the hearts,
I,
because that's really how you awaken someone. It's not so much informing their mind but touching their heart, because there has to be a willingness to align their intention with what is right, Yeah, you know, because you can know what's right or wrong and then just still choose to do the wrong. And I think that we see a lot of that today too, you know?
Very well said. And it's always my personal belief that, an election is not going to save the world. I don't think it's going to make the changes that we need to see. I think that the changes we need are going to start on an individual basis and with ourselves, and then come outward from there. Because, if we look at past, our complete past, there's no leader that we've had that has led us out of any type of situations that we've been in like this.
Yeah. I was told a child is going to lead us, you know? And when I see these youth of today, man, these children being born today, they on X-Man mode, you know? They are holding their heads up one day out the belly. They're looking you straight in the eye, tell you something. And man, these youth of today, if a parent is fortunate enough to be able to raise their children without them getting their DNA corrupted with these, different programs people got in gear, and you know what I'm talking about. Man, we're going to see some real X people, And I say that because, X-men, X-women, but ones that have really activated DNA. Spirits, souls that they don't fall under the veil of forgetfulness when they go through the birth experience. Like me, more probably yourself, ones of our generation, that birth experience is so deep, sometimes we have to fall under the veil of forgetfulness, But these souls coming, they got total recall and their DNA's activated, So I think we need to learn how to fall back and let these children that are coming forward today, let them show us how to get out of this,
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah. And when you contrast that to the old men that they got running, that, one can put a couple of paragraphs together, but the other can't even put a couple of sentences together. It's crazy,
yeah, some of this old regime that we've had that's been in control for thousands of years. We need some new blood in here, and you're right. I do have a lot of hope for our future, and some of the consciousness that I see raising in people. That's very encouraging. One of the things that I'd like to close out and talk about tonight is your 5G wellness. Now, there's this building that I go to quite often, and they recently erected a 5G tower right over it. Now, as soon as I get out of my vehicle and I'm walking towards this building, I feel annoyed. I feel agitated. I start to feel sick to my stomach. And now, of course, we have the mask on, so I can't breathe that well. And this all started occurring, of course, after they erected this 5G tower next to this building. And I completely believe that that's what it's from. So what are your thoughts on what's going on with the erection of 5G everywhere and the integration with the Internet of Things and everything that's happening right now? It seems to be all connected in some nefarious way.
Yeah. But I tell you, I don't really focus on 5G as much as the specs of the human body. If we know our specs, we'll know, just like if you know the specs of any of your technology, you know how to use it safely, without it breaking. And yeah, we got to know our specs. So we got to stay magnetized, okay? We need to ionize, put magnetic ions in our energy system, what you guess would call your aura, right? The sum total of your energy. Nature provides diodes, which is the feldspar family. Diodes only allow energy of one polarity to enter an energy system, you know, and we want that polarity to be magnetic. So the feldspars, moonstone, pneumite, labradorite, amazonite, great nature's diodes. I should have mentioned when the iron family is what we magnetize with, you know, hematite, pyrite, garnets, okay? And, you know, lead shields in industry, lead and heavy elements shield in nature just like they do in industry, you know? So the safest lead stone to work with is amazonite, you know? And we use these things in our spiritual technology, 5G to there, you know? But 5G is different than 1 through 4G in that the cell tower design, they're going to be a lot more closer to you and in your landscape, you know, in your eyescape, where cell towers used to be at a higher elevation, so they had a broader range, you know. The bandwidth that 5G broadcasts over is basically the spectrum that water absorbs energy, and we're 70-something% water. So 5G is going to have a significant impact on our water. You know, that's where the agitation comes in, you know, it's heating up your water. Yeah, and certain bandwidths of 5G I have heard associated with some uh, what you would call syndromes, you know, expression of symptoms with no actual disease present. So the acute respiratory distress syndrome associated with COVID might be induced by the 60 gigahertz bandwidth, you know, and that's possible, do I know? But again, let's just focus on our system, our specs. And I know if I keep myself magnetized, ionized, that's going to be my natural shield against that 5G reality. If I got some of those feldspars on me, you know, I got some
You should just
ionic
carry
crystals.
some on your person. Explain a little bit more how these workings go when you're working with these
Sure,
minerals and crystals.
sure. Well, simplest technology is a wire wrap. Okay, so I have a highly right what I'm wearing now. I don't know how well it's coming through the camera, but I have a highly ionic
Yeah.
stone called lepidolite, which is basically the ore of lithium, right? With a hematite magnet, and just wear it as a pendant. You know, it could be something as simple as that, all the way up to, you know, orgone pyramid bracelet. You know, you can get as complex as you like. I like it simple, you know, not too flashy either, but effective. And, but again, I recommend the 5G Wellness 101. You know, it will give you the basics on how to fortify. I also have a YouTube video on my Ras Bens 188 channel, Fortify Like a Magi, where we get a meter, EMF pollution meter, put it next to a cell phone, and actually demonstrate the stopping power of various crystals, you know.
Yeah, I've seen that before. It's very amazing. People, including myself, not until recently, didn't even realize the power of crystals and some of these minerals. It's very fascinating, and they do work. I've started to. I have orgonite in my house now. I have a few crystals. Um, yeah, I've noticed quite a difference in my surroundings now that I've gotten these around me. If people want to find out more, they can go to your website, which is rasben.com.
Yes. And my YouTube channel is Rasben188. Not too I do have a social media accounts, but I tend to fast from those things, man. I'm not consistent communicating on like FBIG, you know. But I do have a presence there, so you can check me out there. Rasben188 is my name there as well.
Very good. Rasben, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We barely scratched the surface of some of this stuff, so I'd love to have you back on sometime in the future.
Absolutely, I'd be honored. And thanks
Awesome.
for your platform, bro. Keep doing your works.